Jesus before Pilate. Then the Jews led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now, it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, the Jews did not enter the palace. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," the Jews objected. This happened so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then?" said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You were right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. With this, he went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion. Jesus was sentenced to be crucified. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, the King of the Jews!" And they struck him in the face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." And when Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to him, "Here's the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jews insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jews kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at the place known as the stone pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. Here is your king, Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him. Shall I crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar, the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. Thank you, Lord.
I'm not actually planning on speaking for too long today. To be honest, sometimes you don't need to, do you? Sometimes it's enough to let the words and the actions speak for themselves. But last week we left Jesus and his disciples on a real cliffhanger. If it had been an EastEnders episode, we would have finished with the duffs. Duff, 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 duff. I haven't watched it for years. Jesus had been arrested and he'd been taken before Annas and Caiaphas, the Jewish religious leaders. And these religious leaders, they are the guardians of the temple, the guardians of the Jewish religion, the actual representatives of God on earth. That's how they saw themselves. That's how the people saw them. You know, you want to know what God thinks about something? You go to Annas and Caiaphas. A dispute needs settling? Go to Annas and Caiaphas. Actually, Caiaphas was the high priest that year, and Annas, as we saw last week, was his father-in-law. And they both had ultimate power in the temple, but not in the land. Now, more than anything, they wanted Jesus dead. This man who claimed to be God. This man who claimed to forgive sins outside of the temple. This man who was coming in saying he was bringing in a new kingdom. This man who was threatening everything that they had built and structured. He had to die. But they couldn't kill him. They didn't have the power. They didn't have the authority. See, this is part of the awful irony of what was happening here. The religious leaders were desperately wanting a Messiah to come, but they wanted a military Messiah who was going to come in and overthrow Rome and get the Romans out of Israel so that the Jews, you know, God's chosen people, could make and exercise their own laws, set their own taxes, and basically rule their own land. But when the promised Messiah is standing right in front of them, not only do they not recognize him, they go simpering and cowering and sucking up to the people that they hate and despise most in the world to try and get their plans in place. Did you notice that at the end? We have no king but Caesar. And John makes it very obvious in this passage who has the power and who is powerless here. The religious leaders are powerless to do anything without Rome on their side. So they have to send Jesus to Pilate. Pilate is the Roman governor of the area. There had been no more so-called kings since Herod the Great. And instead, there were now governors installed in areas very much under the direct authority of the emperor. Only the emperor of Rome had the authority to sentence someone to death, and he delegated that authority to his governors. So the powerless religious leaders send Jesus to Pilate. And I know it's obvious because Pilate is the Roman governor, but sometimes it's worth pointing out the obvious, because sometimes it's so obvious we just don't see it. See, Pilate is not a Jew. Pilate does not share the belief system of the Jewish people. Pilate is Roman, with all of the superstitions and the beliefs shared by all the Roman people. Rome worshipped a plethora of gods: Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, Venus, and even more. But they were always open to the idea that there were more gods than they knew of. And there were shrines to the unknown God. In Athens, there was a whole temple dedicated to worship of the unknown God. But more than that, Romans believed that the gods could take on human form and visit earth. The Roman emperor himself believed himself to be a son of God. That was one of his official titles. And they believed that they were demigods themselves. And we know that the people believed that gods could visit earth as human beings. Because if you remember in Acts, when Paul and Barnabas healed a lame man, the people came out bringing gifts and worshipping them because they thought exactly that. So that's what we have to understand. All of this is going round Pilate's head as Jesus stands in front of him. And he's trying to figure out who Jesus is. Is he an unknown God visiting earth? Where is he from? What's all this about? And that's why he asks Jesus, where are you from? He's not talking about what province or town or area. He's asking Jesus, where do you come from? Ironically, he doesn't want to do anything that could inadvertently bring the wrath of the gods down on him. But there's one line in there that really stood out to me with regards to power and authority. Because Pilate says to Jesus, doesn't he, you need to answer my questions. Because don't you know that I have the power to kill you or to set you free? I don't know if even Pilate believes that at that point. Because realistically, he knows he has no power. At this moment, in this decision of what happens next to Jesus, Pilate is completely powerless. From a practical, earthly sense, he daren't upset the crowd. The mob are baying for Jesus' blood, even to the point of demanding the release of a known criminal. If Pilate was to let Jesus go free now, it would turn into a riot. He is powerless in the face of the mob. That's why, even though he's told the crowd time and time and time again that he can find no guilt in Jesus, no reason to sentence him to death, he can't let him go because the crowd would lynch him. What he doesn't realise, maybe, is that he's also powerless in the face of God. Because you see, this is how it was always going to be. This was always God's plan. Because Jesus, the Messiah, the anointed one of God, is the suffering servant promised so long ago by the prophet Isaiah and others, but the one who would come and bring healing and forgiveness, hope and salvation through his suffering and his death. Right from the start of his ministry, Jesus has said that he has come to die, not to kill, but to be killed. And he even told people the way he would die, that he would be lifted up on a cross. John chapter 12, verse 32, Jesus says, "And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself." This was always how it was going to be. And Pilate, even though he thinks he holds the place of power, he is powerless to stop it. John's telling of the actual crucifixion is the shortest of all of the Gospels. Like, the build-up and everything around it is so detailed. But the cross itself, we have no, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." We have no, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." We have no temple curtain splitting in two. John just tells us the simple words that Jesus says, "It is finished." It's done. It's completed. Jesus has done what he came to do. He has been lifted up. And you see, for John, this is what the whole of the gospel is pointing towards. This is Jesus in his glory. This is Jesus high and lifted up. And now it is finished. See, for the other gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this is Jesus' passion. This is his suffering. This is his darkest, his lowest time, and his glory comes with the resurrection. But for John, the cross is Jesus' greatest accomplishment. He has done it. He has absorbed all the hatred, all the beating, all the aggression, all the anger, all the sin, all the shame. Everything the world can throw at him, and he has nailed it to the cross. It is finished. But you know what really stood out to me this time as I was reading? It's the whole Barabbas thing, which is bonkers really, because I've read this passage at least once a year for almost the last 30 years. Actually, probably more than that now. But you know how God does that sometimes? He, just as you're reading it, he just brings another bit to life, draws your attention to something that you know, and you know that you know, but maybe you just stopped seeing because it was so familiar. Barabbas. Judah and Jerusalem was full of people who wanted to overthrow the Romans by fair means or foul. And the Zealots were one such group whose sole ambition was to get rid of Rome. I mean, not completely, but to boot them out of Judea, to boot them out of Jerusalem. And the Zealots, like most groups, they had extremists. We would probably call them terrorists today, and assassins. And these people, they would go to the public places and they would kill Romans, and they would kill people friendly with Rome. This was a crime punishable by crucifixion. Actually, just as an aside, thieving, stealing, wasn't a crime punishable by crucifixion. That was a horrendous, torturous punishment saved for the worst offenders. Murder, rape, rebellion, insurrection, terrorism was punishable by crucifixion. Stealing, not so much. So when the other gospel writers tell us of the thief on the cross next to Jesus, actually a better translation from Greek would be the brigand or the rebel. So actually, he was more of a penitent terrorist than a penitent thief. But we're clearly told that Barabbas had been involved in an uprising. He was an insurrectionist. Barabbas was a terrorist. And so when Pilate stands before the crowd and the religious leaders and offers to free Jesus, to have him whipped and punished to keep the people happy, but ultimately to let him go, the people instead shout for the guilty man to go free. That really got me this time. Barabbas, a murderer, a terrorist, an insurrectionist, a guilty man. A man who has stood trial and been found guilty and deserving of death. He gets to go free. And Jesus, an innocent man, the only truly innocent human being, takes his place? Jesus or Barabbas? King of kings or a guilty man? And Jesus stands before Pilate because of the lies, the schemes, the false testimonies that have been made against him. The truth stands there in person, going to his death instead of the murderer, the bandit, the terrorist, the innocent for the guilty. And it's happening there, right in front of Pilate, right in front of Caiaphas and all the religious leaders, but they can't see it. But this is what the cross is about. This is what the cross has always been about. That's why in that final moment, Jesus could declare, it is finished. It is done. The work that he came to do is complete. The price has been paid. The innocent has taken the place of the guilty, and that includes Barabbas. And that includes Israel. It includes the whole world. And it includes you and me. In a minute now, we're going to watch a video showing the crucifixion of Jesus from the film Jesus of Nazareth. And as we watch, I want us simply to remember what we've been thinking about this morning. That the one who goes to the cross is the innocent one, and the ones who walk free are the guilty ones. That is the love of God in action. Let's